Hello. On Tuesdays, going live, I like to do crafts. And today, the craft I'm going to talk about is runes. So I'm just getting my pen ready. Well, when I say pen, knife. Pen knife, haha, see? That's where the words come from. So if you are watching, please say hello. And if you have questions, you can type them in, and there's a high chance I'll manage to read them. If you have questions and you're listening to this after I've been live, then drop me a message and hopefully I'll be able to get back to you. But it's always good to know that people can actually hear me and see me, because I never completely trust the technology. And this technology is quite convoluted. It posts to several different pages, but it's Dumfries and Galloway lift activities, or lift D&G activities, that I'm doing this primarily for, so that if you're stuck in the house, or hopefully in the garden on such a beautiful day, then there are some activities for you to do. And I'm using this wonderful portal to transport you back in time to skills which were normal, everyday skills, only 1,000 years ago. It's funny, 1,000, that's a massive number, isn't it? But 1,000 years? How long is it really? I mean, it's longer than anyone's been alive for, but actually it's probably longer than Scotland has been a country, depending on whether you think of Scotland as covering all of the islands north of Hadrian's Wall, or whether you think of Scotland as Danad and Dalriata and the Kingdom of Scots, just formed fresh from the sea and connected to the north of Ireland as well, because the sea is like a road, and where there's roads you can get places. And at that time, going by land, now that would be hard work. But I digress. Mostly because I started before 2 o'clock, and 2 o'clock is the time I said I was going live. So if you log on early and I get things organised, then you get to hear all sorts of interesting random things. And if you go into the comments and say hello, then I'm able to respond to you because I've got time to look and I'm not caught up in the momentum of my own blether. But yeah, I'm sharpening my knife here. If you want to take part in this, sometimes I find it easier to think with things in my hands. So you might want to get yourself some paper and something to write with. And then you could practice writing the runes as I'm talking about them. But don't worry, if things go too fast, there is a link posted on my page that says how to find my alphabet of runes, well, my Futhark of runes, and some ideas about how to use them. I'm just getting this ready. I'm sharpening my knife with a really nice sharpening stone. If you are ever down at St Ninian's Cave in Whithorn, the stones on the beach there make really good whetstones. So much so that you don't really find whetstones from anywhere else on the beach throughout the whole span of history, because they just walked down to the beach, picked them up. They didn't need to import them from anywhere else, or so I'm told by people wiser than me, or at least more knowledgeable. And if my knife is nice and sharp, so if you're using a knife, you need to think before you do things, and you need to work carefully. Always make sure you're cutting away from you. A good sharp knife is safer than a blunt knife, but any knife can hurt you, so be careful. Sticks. There's probably dangerous ways to gather sticks as well. Most well known with the don't saw the branch you're sitting on the side that's attached to the tree trunk. But there are other good safety tips as well. Like when you're picking up a stick, check that it's not stuck in something nasty. Check that you've permission to take the sticks. Don't harm living trees. They've been there longer than you a lot of the time, and they don't disturb anyone, and they turn the poisonous air into stuff we can breathe, which is very good. But I think it's about time to get going with the runes. Runes are really, really old. You can find things made using runes that go back almost 2,000 years. Having said that, how long is 1,000 years? How long is 2,000 years? You might find it easier to think about it in terms of, well, the first things that we find with runes on them are from around about the time that the Romans were in Carlisle and sending ships up the east coast of what we call Scotland and armies up Scotland to try and move into what they would maybe have called Caledonia. Calgacus, the great swordsman, was written about by them as they turned the world into a wilderness and called it civilization. That was written by a critic of the Roman Empire rather than a supporter. He was looking back to the ancient days of Rome. But anyway, 2,000 years ago, a bit less than that, you start finding things written with runes. So although runes are really, really old, letters that you use every day are probably older. But it's so far back, it's really difficult to tell, and people will argue long and hard about which one came first and whether they're connected. The other thing you should know about runes is that they get called a Futhark. That sounds like a very strange name, but have you heard of an alphabet? Well, that's equally strange, but you might use it more so it seems common. And we call an alphabet because of the names of the letters. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta. So alpha, beta, alphabet. A, B, alpha, beta, A, B. A Futhark is called a Futhark because it is the order in which letters were written. Except the letters are normally called runes. And I'm starting to write one here. And it goes th, th. See, confusing already. But it goes Thor, Canias, and so on, instead of A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now, each of these runes has a name as well. And this is where I'm going to stop using a stick. Because it's really easy, simple to write runes on a stick just by cutting. And you might be able to see if you look really closely. I don't know, if you can see, then put a comment in the comments saying you can see. So if you are in a time when everybody carries a knife around for working on the farm, and where there are sticks all over the place, then picking up a stick, whittling it flat, and carving some runes on it is a really simple, easy way to send a message to somebody, if you know your runes. Around the same time though, people are making books. And this is my writing area here, where I have a treasure. Because to make a book is a lot more complicated than to just pick up a stick and whittle it and carve runes. You have to take the skin of an animal and you have to smooth the skin down. Here's animal skins. And then you need to cut a feather into a pen and write. But I'll do more of that later. The reason I wanted to show you this book is in my book I have some runes. Because this book I use for storing up all of my memories that I forget sometimes. And one of the things I have in it is a copy of a poem about runes. So, for example, the rune S would mean the sound S, and it would also mean Sol or sun. Sun is the cloud's shield, a shining crown, and an end to the life of ice. So you've got the shape S, then you've got the word Sol that says how the shape should be spoken, and then you've got a poem which sets it in context and helps you remember it. A bit like A is for apple, or A is for apple, and then you could have a poem about apples tasting nice and being tickly on the tongue. But they're a bit hard to see as well. So, like I said, runes really old. And that means, like all old things, they change over time. And at the start, they were used mostly in the Germanic lands. That's lands like Germany, but also to the south and to the north. And they're found in objects for hundreds of years, until about the year 700. That's like 1,200 years ago. Or remembering in terms of people moving around, you've got the Saxon tribes. So if you've heard of Sassenach, that means Saxon, and the Anglian kingdom of Northumbria, which was linked to the Saxons, a Germanic tribe, ruled the whole way from Bamborough across to Whithorn, and they set up great pillars and crosses and things, and some of them have got runes on them. But here's where a really big change happened. Runes were used all over the place, but around then you started to get a split, and runes like this start to be used in the lands where you've got more use of letters as well. And so that would be what we now call England, Scotland, Ireland maybe, and maybe southern Germany too. Whereas in the north, the alphabet changes, or the Futhark changes to something like this. Now, if you look at them together, maybe the first thing that stands out is one has got an awful lot of letters in it, or runes, and the other's got less. That means that in this one, almost every sound you can think of has got a shape to make it, to mark it. In this one here, I've put letters underneath that you might recognise, but, well, each shape sometimes needs to represent a lot of sounds, especially the ones like A, E, I, O and U. So here it says F, Th, or, A, R, K. Sorry, Th, Th, O, A, K. And then there's another letter here that also has an A on it. But if you think about the letter A, it can be cat, and it's got an A sound. Or it can be Kate, and it's got an A sound. So they've got the two separate ones there. But if you wanted to have a S, then, well, where's the S in here? And a S, is it going to be a K? Is it going to be a S? It can get fantastically complicated, but reading runes like this that are carved on stones is a real challenge now, because, well, each character can mean lots of different things. Which leads me to the next part of what I was going to talk about, and that's actually making words out of them. And for this, I'm going to use this Futhark here. And the reason I'm using it is if you go to Rothwell near Dumfries, then there are runes carved on the cross there from probably when the Anglians were in charge around the area, and this is the sort of runes they used. So these runes are kind of local, and you can find them in Carlisle Cathedral, you can find them on a brooch up by Hunterston in Ayrshire. You can find runes like this all over. In fact, you can find them in a treasure trove buried somewhere in Dumfries and Galloway near Kirkcudbright as well. Anyway, so that's why I've chosen this Futhark, and it's used from about 700, and it develops, and in the Middle Ages up until around about 1400. That's only like 500 years ago, well, 600 years ago. Still being used as a useful, handy way to write letters, even when they're writing them on vellum rather than carving them on stones. But yeah, see if you can read anything. Ah, thank you for saying that you can see. That's very helpful. Now, if anyone has been thinking or knows about runes already, maybe they will be able to read this one. Can you read it? See if you can recognise the shapes. Because some of the shapes are very much like the shapes you might use today with English, Latin letters. The first sound there would be a B. The second sound, R. Third sound, I or I. Bry. And then the next one, it doesn't really look like a letter we use, but if you kind of followed this sign down a little bit, it would be Bry A. And the last one is kind of like drawing in between the things. It's a letter N, N. And if you think about capital N, it goes up and down and up again. So perhaps it looks very much like the way you would write Brian. Brian. And if you get it the wrong way round, then you write brain, which is great fun if you've got it written on your forehead. Another one. Oh yeah, this one is yeah, we'll have this one here. Let's see if I can see it. Well, this one shows how sometimes sounds have to be changed a bit. So the first one is I, but if you got it at the beginning of a word, you can make it into a jai sound. And then the next one would be a. Next one is like a lightning bolt, and that's S. If you think about the other one, it looks a bit like the letter M, doesn't it? So that would be jazz, m, and then there's again, jazz, m, n, and then an e. Jasmine! If you managed to work that out, congratulations. If you're listening to these later and you send me a list of them, then maybe I'll have a prize. Just to show you were able to listen. So Jasmine. This one's tricky because it's got a letter in it that we don't have in English. So it starts off with S-I, nice and easy. But then this thing at the end here, what could that be? Well, it's a special letter. It's the sound ing. So S-I-ing, sing. Aha! And there's been lots of really good singing going on the Lift activities page, and I've enjoyed the sing-alongs. So, sing. One more name. See if you can work that out. And if you're watching it later, you can pause this and wait until you see if your kids can work it out. And maybe you could have a copy of the alphabet or the Futhark for them to get some clues. So I'm going to say it now. T-O-N-Y. Tony. Aha! So that could be your name. But I'm going to look in my treasure pot now and see if I can find a treasure word. Treasure pot. So this word uses another letter that used to be in English for a long time but has disappeared now, and it's used by two of our letters. So if you've got a T and an H, t, h, together, then usually they get pronounced th, thorn, and that's the name of the letter. So if you wanted to write something and you're using a stick, then sometimes you want it to be nice and short. So you can use thorn for th, and then this is O-R-N, thorn, which is also the name of the letter. So if you know your letters, you could just put the symbol thorn and people would read it and it would mean thorn. You don't even have to put the rest of that. Although it does mean that reading things back can be very complicated. Because if you've got all the runes written together, sometimes people didn't even leave spaces between them. Can you work out what this word is? Or rather, can you work out what all these words are? So pause it if you're playing it again. See if you can work it out. And then I will tell you the answer in 3, 2, 1. Now. I-L-I-K-E, like. I-S-E, ice. K-R-E-A-M. I like ice cream. Haha! And the Romans used to transport ice over the mountains in lead-lined caskets. So you could maybe not have ice cream, but you could have some very nice stuff. Thousands of years ago. Here's another one to pause and see if you can work it out. And it shows you the difficulty. When somebody is looking at archaeology and they want to work out the meaning of a thing, they have to work out what letters, what sounds are being represented. And I'm using English for all of these, but the runes are written in other languages. And so you might not even know how many letters there were in a word that you're looking at. So this one here, you would have to work out what sounds there are, and then work out where to divide them up, so what words there are there, and then you can work out what it means. And then, well, I'm not going to read this one. If you manage it, send me a message, and anyone who manages it and sends me a message, I'll send you a message back. So the last thing I want to do is to show you how it can get even more complicated. Now, where will I start? Ah, yes. With my quill, sometimes I make words into pictures. And believe it or not, this is actually my name. Bad. All the letters are all jumbled up into a picture, and it makes it tricky to read. But also, we can make it a pretty picture. This was just a quick one I did. As well as that, though, I could write it. Oh yeah, if I'm using the runes, this is what it is here. Then I could write K-A-th form B-A-D, Cathbad. Or I could miss out some of the letters because, well, obviously anybody who is able to read runes knows you don't need to put the vowels in. And I could just put all the important ones, like k, th, bud. And if you go kuthbud, there's only so many ways the sounds work. And so the vowels, the ahs, they can be missed out. Kuthbud. And if you see kuthbud, you know it's Cathbad. Or Cuthbert, or various other things, but Cathbad will do. But if you're doing that, you can be even more economic with your time. Lazy would be another way of saying it. And you can put them all together. So here I've got one up and down stave, it's called, and then I have the k, I have the thorn, th, I have the b, I have the d, and I have the ah. I mean, there's two ahs, but you don't need to write them twice. So this rune here, it looks like one rune, is actually my whole name, Cathbad, all bound together into one chunk. So can you imagine that? The whole Cathbad concentrated into a few lines cut onto a piece of stick. I'm not sure it's possible, is it? But if you could do that, how powerful would that stick be? Now, people like playing with letters. They like playing and making games and hiding things. And sometimes people like showing off because they're clever too. And this can be fun and it can be bad. It's not good to be a show-off. But if you're playing a game with each other and everyone understands it's a game, that can be great. So I'll show you another game you can play. And that is a bit like a code. Do you remember I said that each of these letters is also a name and a poem? Well, if you write out the poem, then you write it out in a set way on the page so that it makes sense. So you could have thorn, fail, wealth, urch, thorn, ass, and so on. And if you know the poem and you have it in your head, then you can remember where the letters fit in the poem. You know, A is for apple, B is for ball. So if I wanted to talk in code to you, if you knew the same song, then I could go 1 and you would know that it was A and that was apple. And then, so I could go 1, not 2, and that could be apple, not ball. Or if you're writing runes, you can draw all sorts of little trees. And these ones here are all a code. On this side of the rune, there's 1 stick or 1 branch, and on that side of the rune I think there's 8 of them. So you would go to the first line and then the 8th letter, and that would show you where to find the sound. So here is a key, and it says the second rune, 3rd letter in the poem, is I, or ice. So I put another message here. See if you can do the code and work it out. Now, the thing is, that only works if people write the poem in the same way. But poetry is like that. It locks all the words into an order and a pattern. Otherwise, they don't rhyme. For example, if I were to rhyme about a crime, then I'd be right every time. But if I were to rhyme about a dog, that would rhyme with log and not crime. See? Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does. But the rhyme locks things in place so they can be remembered. And if you're clever enough to remember the rhyme, remember the pattern, then you can be clever enough to read the runes or write them as a code to other people who are also as clever. Well, that is pretty much my time up today. I hope you've enjoyed this whirlwind look at runes, and I hope you've had time to write some things down. Send me messages. If you look carefully, then you can find a way to do it in runes, and I will do my best to read it. Otherwise, you could maybe send me a picture of your runes. And if people manage to translate the messages that I didn't translate, then, well, maybe I'll see if I can find some treasure to send back. Or at least I'll write a rune for you and maybe send it as a picture. So, thank you very much for listening and for watching this, wherever in the world you are. Remember the magic of being able to take thoughts and put them on paper so they can become visible and so they can last longer than you can think of them. But always enjoy researching, finding out where things are, working out what is true and solid. Because otherwise you just drift around in the mists of time and lose your roots. I may live in a floating monastery, but it's one that is rooted in history and just able to wobble around and float through time to where it is required. Thank you very much for listening again, and I will see you on Sunday for some more stories of saints, and then next week I'll be back with more Viking stories and another craft. And I've been asked to look into some stories about the Abbey, so I'll check that out as well. Thank you. Bye bye.